On page 97 is where we will begin looking at reflexive verbs. That first paragraph, it says reflexive verbs are those verbs in which the action reflects back to the subject. So basic grammar, what is a subject? A subject is the one doing the action, right? In a sentence, if somebody asks you which one of these is the subject, whoever is doing the action is the subject. So in this case, the subject, the one doing the action, is doing the action to someone, which generally would be the direct object, right? So the direct object is the one that receives the action. For example, if I kicked Anson, Anson would be the direct object because he's the one receiving the action, not the one doing the action. The subject, I, am doing the action of kicking, and Anson is the one receiving the kick. Okay, so Anson would be the direct object. In this case, a reflexive verb means the subject and the direct object is the same person. So that means that you're doing the action to yourself. So that would be things like looking at yourself in the mirror, washing your hands. Okay, so it says that it's not just simply doing the action to yourself, but it could be, in Spanish, reflexive verbs could be verbs where you do the action to yourself, or a part of yourself, or for yourself, or by yourself. Okay, so notice the key word, self, right? Reflexive. Okay, it's reflecting the action back on yourself. That's the point. Verbs are made reflexive by conjugating them with reflexive pronouns. So that means that the verb that's not reflexive may be the same verb as a reflexive verb. The part that makes it, that differentiates it, is the fact that you're using a reflexive pronoun. Now remember, a pronoun is a word that refers to the object or to the noun that replaces it, right? So if I kicked Anson, Anson's the direct object, but then if I said I kicked him, him is a pronoun. It's a pronoun referring to the noun. So these reflexive pronouns are words that refer to the person, just like any other pronoun normally does. However, they're different from the subject pronouns, and this is why. The subject pronoun is the pronoun that refers to the person doing the action, and this reflexive pronoun, just like direct object pronouns, are pronouns that refer to the person receiving the action. Now, that's always going to be the same person as the subject pronoun when it's reflexive. It'll be different when it's a direct object pronoun, but that's also why many of these pronouns they have them in common with direct object pronouns. Does anybody remember what all of the direct object pronouns are? It would be the words for like him, I kicked him, I hugged her, I ate it, those words. They were me, te, and then what? Anyone remember? This is where they're different. Huh? Close. That's what these are. These are reflexive. Se. But that's a good guess. Lo and la. Me, te, lo, la, nos, os, los, las. That would be the direct object. The indirect object was me, te, le, and nos, os, les. Okay? So these are reflexive, and again, a third set, slightly different, and it's that third person section that's different. Me, te, se, nos, os, se. Notice also that se is for singular and plural, right? So se, mira, means he is looking at himself, that's singular, but it doesn't say like ses miran. You would expect it to say ses, but it doesn't. It stays the same. So se is third person singular and plural, which means that one word could mean you, like yourself in the formal, right? Usted se. Se could mean él, himself, or herself, él or ella. It could mean ustedes, you all, formal. so formal plural, ustedes se miran. Or se miran could also mean they are looking at themselves, boys or all girls, or both. So the one singular reflexive pronoun se has many different meanings that you'll just need to differentiate based on the context. So that's what it says there. Notice that se is the reflexive pronoun for él, ella, usted, ellos, ellas, and ustedes. The reflexive verbs are used frequently in Spanish. On the contrary, reflexive pronouns are often implied rather than expressed in modern English. So in Spanish, reflexive verbs always use reflexive pronouns. But English does not always use reflexive pronouns. However, English does have reflexive verbs. Like when we say, I kicked myself. Okay? So that's a reflexive pronoun, myself. And it has that word self in common. Okay, so let's look at some examples. Me baño. Me baño. Notice that the verb baño is conjugated like a regular AR verb with an O, like hablo. Actually, it's like all of them, but it's an AR verb, bañar. So it's O because you replace the AR in the root. Sorry, the AR in the infinitive with an O. Bañ, that's the root. Take off the AR from bañar and replace the AR with an O. Baño. And then you add the reflexive pronoun at the beginning. So me. Does that mean that there's no subject pronoun? Because it doesn't show it. Why does it not say yo me baño? Any guess? Yeah, it's redundant. Good. It's redundant in two ways. If it's reflexive, then you automatically know that if it says may, even though the pronoun may doesn't refer to the subject, it's the same person. So it's redundant there because you can imply that it's I, even though it says me, because it's reflexive. But then also the ending of the verb, the O, refers to the first person singular subject. Just like hablo and como and vivo, they all end in O because that's the I form, right? So me baño, it's redundant to say yo me baño. However, you may see it at times, and it'll show up when the writing or the person saying it is trying to emphasize I'm doing whatever it is. So if the emphasis is that I'm doing it, then they might include the subject pronoun, as well as the reflexive. Raúl se afeita. Raúl is shaving, or literally is shaving himself. So this is trying to point out that in English, we don't always use the reflexive. And so the translation might not reveal that the verb is reflexive, unless you translate it literally. So if I say me baño, in English I'll say I am taking a bath. That's a subject, I, a verb, am taking, and a bath, a direct object. There's no reflexive nature of that. However, in Spanish there is. And so that translation is lost unless you translate it literally as I am bathing myself. So the same thing with Raúl is shaving. So remember at the top it said reflexive pronouns and reflexive verbs are ones that indicate the subject is doing something to itself or a part of itself or for itself or by itself or on its own. So this is an example of that. Raúl is shaving. In English we'd never say Raúl is shaving himself. That would be kind of odd. But we would say Raúl is shaving. So turning the page to page 98. Many verbs in Spanish can be used in either reflexive or non-reflexive constructions or conjugations. Notice how the addition of the reflexive pronoun affects the meaning of the verb. So you might have a verb, but the moment you change it to reflexive by using a reflexive pronoun at the beginning, then it changes the meaning because they'll be used differently. They're related, but they have different meanings. So, acostar means to go to bed. Sorry, acostar means to put someone to bed, but acostarse means to put yourself to bed. So we'll talk about the infinitives for reflexive verbs in a moment. But la niña, the first one, se acuesta. Is the first one se acuesta or la madre acuesta? Which one or two, first or second, is the reflexive? The first example, la niña se acuesta temprano, or the second example, la madre acuesta a la niña temprano? Which one is reflexive? Which one's reflexive? The first one, exactly. And how do you know?
I just read the thing. It's like, notice how the addition of the reflexive says added.
Good. Yes. So the reflexive pronoun se was added to the verb acostar. So la niña se acuesta. Se is the reflexive pronoun from that list on 97. If you turn back a page, there's that list. It says me, te, se, nos, os, and se. Those are the reflexive pronouns. So when you see those right before a verb, especially a regularly conjugated verb, then you can assume that it's reflexive, okay? So when the verb acostar is reflexive, la niña se acuesta temprano, it means the little girl goes to bed early. That's different than putting someone to bed, because literally it could be translated, la niña, the girl, se acuesta, herself puts to bed temprano, early. So the little girl puts herself to bed. In English, we would just say the little girl goes to bed, and so they translate it that way. It's really helpful if you guys can try to understand two things when you read Spanish. Number one, understand what they're trying to say and the best way that it could be said in English, but also understand exactly what they're saying. So the literal translation. If you can work at trying to understand both, that's going to really help you in understanding conversation when you speak Spanish with someone. So then, la madre acuesta, without the reflexive pronoun, who's the subject? Notice that there's the girl in the first one, la niña se acuesta temprano. And the second one, there's a new person, la madre acuesta la niña. And there's the girl, la niña again. So who's the subject in the second one? La madre, good. And who's the subject in the first one? Don't be ashamed to give the answer. It's an easy answer. Who is the subject in the first example? Thank you. La niña. Good. So la niña se acuesta, puts herself to bed. And the second one, la madre acuesta, the madre is putting someone else to bed. The mother is not putting herself to bed, so because it's not reflexive. So who is she putting to bed? La niña. So la niña is what? What would la niña be? The what? What is la niña? What would she be considered grammatically? The direct object or indirect object? Sorry? The direct object, right, because she's the one receiving the action. Do you guys remember what makes an indirect object an indirect object? As differentiated from a direct object? So think of it as a progression. The subject does the action. The direct object receives the action. And the indirect object receives the direct object. So if I gave a meal to someone, okay, then the meal is receiving the action of giving. If I give something, I'm giving the meal. The meal is what's being given, so it receives the action. However, whomever I give it to, receives the direct object. the object that's being given, and they would be the direct object. So, they would be the indirect object. All right, so Raquel se duerme a las 9. Rachel goes to sleep or sleeps herself at 9. Or Raquel duerme toda la noche. Raquel sleeps the whole night. So notice the difference. One is Raquel goes to sleep, se duerme, puts herself to sleep. The second one is duerme, sleeps. So there's a very big difference, subtle, but it is an important difference, right? And it's simply the difference between using a reflexive pronoun or not. But the verb is conjugated the same. Paco se baña por la noche. Paco takes a bath at night. Or Paco baña a su perro con agua y jabón. So Paco bathes someone else besides himself. Takes a bath, or he bathes his dog with water and soap. Now, the following reflexive verbs deal with daily routine in that first group. And the second group, the reflexive verbs, deal with personal grooming. So one of them has to do with my routine in the day, and the other has to do with my personal hygienics. Is that a word? Hygienics? Yeah, that's right. Okay. All right, so make sure that you look over those verbs. Acostarse means to go to bed, and there's lots of ones there. But while we're here, and these are all infinitives, let's look at the infinitive. What do you guys notice that's different about these infinitives from a normal infinitive verb? It has the se at the end, right? Now, when we think about an infinitive and how you conjugate it, what part of the infinitive do you replace? Let's take the verb hablar, for example. Hablar. What do you replace in the verb hablar to conjugate it for myself? For I. The AR, exactly. It's the end of the verb, right? Now in these, you also do that. You replace the AR, but you don't leave that se at the end. So for example, acostarse would not be acostose, right? You drop that reflexive se that's connected to the end of the infinitive, and you remove it. And then you choose the right reflexive pronoun and place it at the beginning of the verb and separate from the verb. And then you conjugate the AR just like normal, or the ER or the IR. Does everyone understand that? I don't want you to think that you would say acostose or dormese. You conjugate the verb normally. That reflexive se is connected at the end, just to show you that this infinitive is referring to the reflexive verb, not the regular verb. So make sure you understand that. Okay, so let's talk about the position of the reflexive pronoun. Posición del pronombre reflexivo. The reflexive pronouns follow the same rules of placement that other object pronouns do. They usually precede the conjugated verb. However, in a verb plus infinitive or progressive construction, using the participle, they may either precede the conjugated verb or be attached to the end of the infinitive or present participle. So it says here in the example, usted se va a levantar a las 8. So usted means what? ¿Qué significa usted? Somebody tell me what usted means. I'll tell you it's a subject pronoun, not a reflexive pronoun. So it means it's referring to the person doing the action. And what does it mean? Yes, you. It means you. Is it singular or plural? Singular. And is it formal or informal? Formal, right. So it's the formal singular way of saying you, when you are the one doing the action. So you, something yourself. What does the verb va mean? Yeah, you or he goes, and you choose you or he depending on whether or not the word usted is there, and it is. Right, so usted va would mean you go. And what does levantar mean? Why don't you guys look it up? Somebody look up levantar. Or you can look up levantarse, which is there in your book. Sorry? Yes, to get up, right? Like levitate. When you levitate, it means you float down or up. You float up, of course, right? So levantarse means to get yourself up, like get yourself up out of bed. So usted se va a levantar a las 8. You get yourself up, or you are going to get yourself up at 8. So now notice what's happening here. The va and the usted are saying you are going. And then there's the infinitive verb, levantar, but it's reflexive because they're getting themselves up. So this is showing you that you can put the se in one of two places. You could either separate it from the infinitive and put it before the to-go verb. So usted se va a levantar. Or you can place the se at the end of the infinitive. Usted va a levantarse. Either one will be okay. So they're both correct. Usted se va a levantar, or usted va a levantarse. Anyone have any questions about how that works? Okay. Can I say this though? Usted se va a levantarse? No, do not say both. Both would be incorrect. You can say one or the other. Would this be okay? Usted va se a levantar? No. What about usted va a se levantar? No. It either goes before the complete verb, and the complete verb would be va a levantar, right? The whole construction of you are going to go, or you are going to wake up. Okay, it's got to go before that whole construction, va a levantar, or connected to the end of the infinitive at the end. The reflexive, this is the top of page 99. The reflexive pronoun is always attached to the end of the infinitive, to the end of the verb when it's in the command, an affirmative command, but it always precedes the negative command. So that means that when you want to command someone to do something, like despiertarte, then you would say it at the end if you're commanding them to do something. If you're commanding them to not do something, then it always comes before the verb, but after the word no. So despiertate temprano, or no te levantes tarde. Okay? Everyone understand that? All right. So your homework, you can look it up online. I believe it was activities 1, 2, and 3. But it should be online for you to look at. Please go ahead and get started on that. And then, what would you guys like to do some of them together? All right. Let's do the example and the first one for each one first. So, actividad 1, supply the correct form of the reflexive verb in parentheses. El señor Baez despertarse a las 6. El señor Baez se despierta a las 6. So, who's the subject? That's the first thing you want to ask yourself. Who's doing the action of whatever the verb is? In this case, it would be el señor Baez. And is el señor Baez first, second, or third person? Third person. Because I am first person, you are second person, and he's neither of those. And so whoever's left is third person. If it's not me and it's not you, it's third person. Okay. So Senor Baez is third person. Anson, is it singular or plural? Is Senor Baez singular or plural? Singular, right, because he's just by himself. He's the only one that they're referring to. So third person singular, which means which reflexive pronoun do we use? Me, te, or se, nos, os, or se. Which is the third person singular? Is it me? Is that third person singular? Nope. Is it te? That's second person singular. It must be se. So, the answer, el señor Baez, se, and then conjugate the AR verb despertar as an A third person singular verb. And it's a root changing verb. So the E changes to an IE. Despierta. Se despierta a las 6. Let's do the first one. La señora de Baez, so not the señor Baez, but the señora Baez, levantarse. How do we conjugate the verb levantarse for la señora Baez? Anybody give a guess? Start with asking yourself whether or not Senora Baez is first, second, or third person singular. And then choose which reflexive pronoun you would use to refer to herself. So la señora de Baez, what? Sorry? Me. So me refers to myself. Right? Just like me. Me. That would be first person. This is the Señora Baez. So the Señora Baez is the subject. She's third person because it doesn't say yo. Yo is first person, right? So Señora Baez is third person. So we choose the third person reflexive pronoun, which is what? Se, right. So even though it's a girl, not a boy, it's still third person, like the example, el modelo. So now we got to conjugate levantar for third person singular again, which would be what? Levanta, exactly. So el señora de Baez se levanta a las 6:15. So the Mrs. Baez gets herself up at 6:15. 6:15. Everyone understand how to do activity 1? All right. For activity 2, you can do that if you're in class, asking a partner, ¿a qué hora te despiertas? What time? And you guys can respond to yourself. If you end up doing that activity at home, then you can just write your own responses, asking yourself questions. Which is ironic, because if you're asking yourself questions, then you're being reflexive. Okay, activity 3. Determine if the reflexive form of each verb in parentheses is necessary, then supply the correct form for each verb. So cepillar, mis hermanos, cepillar los dientes después de comer. So you're going to need to understand the sentence and ask yourself, are they doing it to themselves or to a part of themselves or for themselves or by themselves? And then if they are, you'll need the reflexive, and if they're not, then you won't. All right? Okay. So unless anybody has any questions, go ahead and get started on activity 1, 2, and 3. And if you do, I'll come around and we'll look at it. All right? All right.